Hi everybody, thanks for joining our webinar today. So let me just give you an overview of what you should expect to see today. So we're going to be looking at our policy templates feature, and we'll develop a policy live together on the call. We're going to now dive into that S3 example, and we're going to actually build that into Spacelift itself. So if I come here to my stack screen, I have this S3 bucket stack. All this is going to be doing is it's going to create S3 buckets with public ACLs. We're going to check for that public ACL, make a determination on what to do, and ask for approvals from there. So if I head back to our policies, actually, go back into the templates, I know just from searching through here that there is a policy type called enforce instance type. This is a plan policy. Now this plan policy is enforcing instance type, so it's looking at things like T2 extra large, T2 2x large. It's looking at AWS instances. We're going to modify this policy to instead look at S3 bucket ACLs. Let me grab a drink really quick because my voice is getting pretty hoarse again. So I'm going to actually go ahead and just import this into my account. I'm going to change the name because we're going to make this S3 based. So we'll see S3 bucket ACL check. We'll put it in the root space. I'm going to add some extra labels to it. Webinar. And I'm also going to add this auto attach, which if you're not familiar with this, the auto attach label is a special label. It's basically going to say auto attach to any stack in Spacelift that has the webinar label attached to it. And the stack that we're working with does have that, so it's automatically going to attach it to it. So I'm going to click continue now. I'm going to go ahead and actually just create this policy, and then we'll jump back into the edit view. So now if I click into this, you'll see it's used by one stack. It's used by that S3 bucket stack. I can drop it back into here. Now the really important part here is that we have sample equals true. I'm going to show you right now why that's important. So let me jump over to the stack itself. Stacks. We will go S3 bucket and we'll go ahead and click trigger. So right now this is going to automatically approve, automatically create that S3 bucket. It's not going to stop anything from happening because we haven't changed the policy. It's not actually looking for S3 buckets yet. It's still looking for EC2 instances. However, we added that sample equals true flag to the policy. And when we do that, it gives us a nice little view where we can actually change and modify that policy using actual inputs that would be used in a production case. So once this planning phase is done, we'll see a little drop down in here in just a second. Cool. So now we can see this plan policy evaluated to allow. We have this little arrow here. We have this arrow here because we added that sample equals true. I can click this arrow. Now what this is going to do is it's going to give us this nice little simulation panel. It's going to show us the actual policy body that was evaluated, which is that policy we imported, the input into the policy itself. If you're not familiar with Rego, which is the language that is written here, the way Rego works is it takes some JSON, inputs it into the policy body, and it gives you outputs. And you're able to see all of that from here. So if I click the simulate button, you can see it wasn't denied, there was no flags, and there was no warnings, which is why the plan policy evaluated to allow. So we're going to actually modify this policy body now. I can tell you right off the bat we're not going to need this allow list because we're only going to be looking for S3 ACLs that we want to deny. So our deny list, we're going to have a deny list of public C read and public read write. So if any S3 ACL gets created with public read or public read write, we want it to deny. So actually not deny, we're going to warn and flag so that we can have an approval that happens after that. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to actually write the policy body itself. So right now, this whole thing is what's called a rule in Rego, and it's going to be a deny rule. So it will actually fill out this deny output here. So we're going to actually remove this message for one. We're going to look through the input here. And I know just from doing this previously that I can go to spacelift.run. So it's input.spacelift.run. Scroll down until I find it. stack tracked. Oh, I might have missed it. Where is run? Stack. We're looking for it on this line right here. Run. Okay, so there's run, input.stack.run, and then changes. So this is going to be a list of all the changes that's actually happening inside of this plan. And if I look through this changes, I can see all of the resources. So I can see there's an S3 bucket getting created, and there's an S3 bucket ACL getting created. I'm also able to see what the values of that S3 bucket ACL are. So I can see that I'm trying to create a publicly read ACL bucket. So the first step of this is we're going to look for that specific resource. So we're going to look at input.spacelift.run.changes, and we're going to iterate over all of the changes. So this is an array. If I scroll back up to changes, run changes, you can see it's an array. So changes, we're going to loop over the array. Now we're going to look at that specific resource, and we're going to say, hey, if that resource has an entity data that has, wrong one, we're going to look at the ACL, has an entity data that has a value of ACL that is public read, then we want to deny the run. So we'll say resource, this is a variable, we'll say resource dot entity dot, we're going to look at the type, which is, we're going to check the type first. So if the type is AWS S3 bucket ACL, if it's an AWS S3 bucket ACL, and if the ACL equals, we're going to look for public read here. So we're going to say ACL equals resource dot entity dot data dot values dot ACL. So entity data values ACL. If it is in the deny list, if the ACL is in the deny list, then we will mark this deny as true. We're not actually going to deny it in this either. We're going to create a flag, and we'll get to that in a minute and why we're going to do that. But we're going to create a flag when all of that is true, and the flag is going to be called unapproved S3 bucket ACL. I'm going to delete this allow list because we don't have an allow list anymore, and we're going to delete this call to allow list. So now when I simulate this, we should see this flag gets filled out with unapproved bucket ACL. So if I just scroll up a hair, click simulate, you can see we now have a flag that says unapproved bucket ACL. We also want to warn the user so that they know what's happening. So we're going to copy this content, and we're just going to paste it right here into this warn, but we're going to leave message. So the warning, what you actually put in between these two brackets is what we'll print inside of Spacelift. So we're going to sprint through the message. So we're going to actually change this message to say S3 bucket, we'll say %s has unapproved ACL, and we'll say %s again. Now what this is going to do is it's going to replace these %s's with the position of this array here. So we'll say the resource dot entity dot address is ACL. So ACL. So now this will say S3 bucket, AWS S3 bucket ACL. This has unapproved ACL, and then what the actual ACL is, which will be public read. So now if I click simulate again, you'll see we have that exact message. Public ACL has unapproved ACL public read. So now we have the policy made for this right now. We can copy this policy body. We can head back to our policies. We can go in here and we can just replace it all and click Save Changes. So that's going to warn us and create a flag whenever an S3 bucket has an improper ACL on it. Now we're going to head back to templates, and I'm going to search for a template called Require Approval from Security Team. And I'm not actually going to make changes to this one right yet. For S3 buckets, I'm going to put it in that space. I'm going to give it a label. And the reason that I'm doing that is because I just want to get this sample for right now. So we're going to go ahead and create this, make sure that it is assigned to our stack, which it is. Now I'm going to go ahead and trigger it again. So when we trigger it this time, we should see that warning pop up, and it will also create an approval, but it's just because we just so happen to create this specific approval policy. But we're going to change it a little bit to actually work for our use case. So once this plan's finished, we should see that warning. All right, so now you can see this plan policy evaluated to warn. It says S3 bucket, AWS S3 bucket has unapproved ACL public read. Perfect. Now we'll get another approval here, and all I really wanted this for is so that I could see the sample itself. So now we're working on the approval policy, and we want this approval policy to only come up if that flag from the plan policy is populated with that unapproved S3 bucket ACL flag. So if we look at this policy, right now it's auto-approving if the run state is not unconfirmed, which is perfect because that's going to auto-approve it here at the bottom, which is why it approved automatically. But we do want to add a second rule, and we want to add the second rule to require approval whenever that flag is set. So again, if I look at this input, I can scroll down here to input.run. There should be a flags key in here. Let's see how far down it is. Flags. So flags, you can see flags, unapproved S3 bucket ACL. Now this will only ever be here if that plan policy finds that unapproved S3 bucket ACL and sets that flags rule. So we're going to add a second rule. Inside of Rego, when you have multiple rules with the same name, they are ORed together. However, things inside of the rules are ANDed together. So if I write this, approve input dot, what was it again? Run dot flags. We're going to iterate all over the flags equal, or does not equal actually, unapproved S3 bucket ACL. So it's going to automatically approve as long as none of the run flags say unapproved S3 bucket ACL. Now when you have two rules with the same name in Rego, they're going to be ORed together. So if this evaluates to true, it will approve it. Or if this evaluates to true, it will approve it. However, within each rule, you have multiple different variables that can be used as a Boolean value, and these are going to be ANDed together. So that's the big thing that you need to remember. If you have multiple rules, like this required approvals here, these are going to be ORed together. These are going to be ANDed together. So if action equals resource.actions is true and action equals added is true, then this required approval rule will be true. The next part is we don't really need this approval list anymore because we're going to be looking at the S3 buckets itself. We're not looking at I think we're looking at EC2 instances or something. We also don't need these require approval rules anymore. These were just helper rules in that policy. The next thing that's important here is going to be this approvals key. So this is actually going to be a list of who has approved the actual run, which right now nobody has clicked anything, so approvals is an empty array. But as you actually click the approve button here, it will create more approvals in that approvals array. So what we actually want to do is we want to define what it means to be in the security team. Now what's actually here is probably what you would actually use, but it's just me on this call, so I'm going to actually change this word security to just be Apollo Orion, which is my username in GitHub. And we'll say that if Apollo Orion equals any of the approvals author, then that would be considered a security approval. And I'll show you what that means here in just a second. And then the rest of this we can just leave as boilerplate. All of this is perfectly fine. Now if I click simulate, you'll notice that it doesn't it's not going to approve it. It's going to be approved equals false. And that's just because I've not actually clicked the approve button. And when I click the approve button, I'm not going to do it right here, but it will fill out this approvals array. So I can actually come in here. You can see a security approval is someone that's in approvals.author is Apollo Orion. So I can say author is Apollo Orion. Now that I have that, that simulates me clicking that approve button. I can click simulate again, and now you can see it says approve is true. So we know this policy is correct. It's looking at the unapproved S3 bucket ACL flag, and it's making sure that whoever approves it is part of the security approval group, what have you. So we'll go ahead and copy this policy. We'll drop it right into this approval policy here, and we will click Save Changes. Now we can run this again. It's in an unconfirmed state, which is fine. We can reject it. Yes. We can trigger this plan again. From here, you can see it automatically approves at the beginning because we want the actual plan to happen, which is why we had that, oops, wrong button. Why we had that approve run state does not equal confirmed. That's what actually approved it here. We'll initialize, we'll run the plan. We will have the plan policy see that we're creating an S3 bucket with the public ACL. We will then throw up a warning so that the user knows why that we know we're asking for approval, and then we will ask for approval from somebody on the security team. So you can see we got that warning. S3 bucket has unapproved ACL public read, and the it's asking for an approval now. If I look at this, I can simulate it again if I wanted to. Approve false. As soon as I click that approve button, it will evaluate to approved because I am Apollo Orion and I'm on the security team. So you can see now it's approved. Now, something that kind of confuses a lot of people here too is that you have, when you ask for approval, you still have to have it confirmed. So you can kind of think of this as kind of like GitHub. In GitHub, when you open up a PR, you have approvals, but then you actually have to still merge the code after those approvals are granted. So this is basically like a two-step process. You get the approval, your security team says it looks good, you're able to apply this code, and then you're able to come back in here and merge the pull request. I put up air quotes and click confirm. And once I click confirm, it will go ahead and move into the apply phase, and it will actually apply those changes. So you can see it's preparing. And we're moving into the apply phase. And now we're applied. So now we have, the required permissions to be able to actually create this public S3 bucket with guardrails and approvals. So that's kind of the demo that I wanted to give you guys. But really quickly before I pass it back, I do want to just show you a couple really interesting policies that we do have. So if you come over to the policies and go to templates, this advanced automated retries one, for example, this is, if you were to import this into your account, this is going to make it really easy to create retries and have different stacks have a different amount of retries basically. So if I click the description, it says this policy can be configured on a per stack basis by setting Spacelift retry number on the stack's label. So you can import this into your account, and then if anybody wants to have their stack automatically retry, they can just add Spacelift _retry :3, for example, and it will retry a failure up to 3 times. And if it works successfully, it won't do that retry. And then the last two that I wanted to shout out really quickly that we don't actually have in templates, and the reason for that is because they're a little bit more complicated. Let me pull out my sidebar here. So we have this InfraCost plugin, and this is available at Spacelift Solutions plugin InfraCost. You can give us your InfraCost API key, create some cost restriction rego policies, and we have some policies that you can use as boilerplate here as well if you'd like. but it can, check to make sure that you're not spending too much on your infrastructure up to like certain amounts of budgets via infra cost. And all this is a policy. So if I click this policy TF, you'll see that it's just creating different Spacelift policies. And if you look in examples full, we have this cost restriction rego file that is creating the actual policy itself. If I come to main TF, you'll see how we point to that rego file so that you can make sure that your infrastructure is getting created within budget limits. And then the last one that I wanted to shout out really quickly is going to be our Spacelift Datadog policy. Again, this is actually going to create a notification policy that sends metrics to Datadog, and it talks about different metrics that it's actually sending. But if you look at the policy.tf again here, it is just a Spacelift policy. You can see the actual rego in that policy within the repository. I think it's under assets policy, so it's just rego. So you can actually come in here, add more metrics, delete metrics, whatever it is that you want to do using Spacelift policies that are very, very powerful. Thanks, everybody.